The galaxy had ruled itself for centuries through a single belief: that power belonged to the old empires and that newcomers existed only to be managed. Humanity was one such newcomer. Fast, adaptive, irritatingly innovative, but still considered small. Their systems lay on the fringe, their ships labeled impressive for their age, their diplomats tolerated, never respected. The Galactic Concord decided Earth was a problem best solved early. The official reason was security. A Concord scout vessel vanished near Terran space, its last transmission garbled and incomplete. No wreckage was found. No proof existed. None was required. Concord media channels declared humanity hostile within hours, replaying ancient footage of human wars, riots, and failed colonies as evidence of inherent aggression. Context was ignored. History was weaponized. Fear was curated with precision. Humanity responded the way it always did at first, with words. Terran diplomats transmitted open-channel messages across the frontier, offering joint investigations, data transparency, and neutral observers. Their tone was calm, almost restrained to a fault. To the Concord, this restraint confirmed everything they believed. Powerful species did not ask. They demanded. The High Council voted unanimously to correct Terran overreach before it became inconvenient. The correction came as plasma fire. A Concord patrol group translated into a quiet research system and annihilated a Terran outpost devoted to stellar mapping. No defenses fired back. No warning was issued. 112 human lives ended in less than 40 seconds. The Concord commander recorded a triumphant statement about decisive action. It was broadcast across dozens of systems as proof that humanity could be disciplined like any other upstart race. What the broadcast did not show was the silence that followed on Earth. There were no riots. No threats. No speeches filled with rage. Instead, military channels activated across the Sol system, some of them dormant for decades. Deep beneath shipyards, under layers of encryption so dense even human civilians didn't know they existed, authorization codes were verified. Old admirals were awakened from retirement. Long-sealed command protocols resurfaced, bearing a title no alien intelligence service had ever translated correctly. Vanguard Fleet Activation. Within the Terran Federation, that phrase carried weight heavier than any declaration of war. It was not vengeance. It was not escalation. It was a final acknowledgement that diplomacy had failed and survival now required certainty. The Vanguard fleet was not designed to threaten borders or posture in negotiations. It existed to end wars quickly, decisively, and without apology. A single message was sent to the Concord, unencrypted and unmistakably human in its simplicity. Stand down. Withdraw all forces from Terran space. Submit to joint investigation. This is your final warning. The Concord laughed. Their analysts dismissed the message as theater, a bluff meant to save face. Human fleets, they argued, were too young, too resource-limited, too decentralized to challenge a unified galactic power. Concord admirals spoke openly of marching to Earth itself, of teaching humanity the cost of defiance. Plans were drawn. Celebrations scheduled. They never noticed the stars changing. Across hidden shipyards beyond known trade lanes, space bent and folded as engines far larger than Concord models powered up in silence. Hulls emerged that were not sleek for beauty or oversized for intimidation, but shaped by brutal efficiency. Crews boarded without ceremony. Orders flowed without debate. No speeches were given. No flags waved. Because for humanity, this moment was not about pride. It was about making sure no one ever mistook restraint for weakness again. Humanity's greatest advantage was not its weapons, but its preparation. Long before the Concord ever noticed Earth, human strategists had accepted an uncomfortable truth: the galaxy rewarded strength and punished hesitation. Early encounters had proven it. Treaties were respected only when backed by fleets. Promises lasted only as long as fear remained. From that lesson, a decision was made that would never be debated publicly. The Vanguard fleet was conceived not as a show of power, but as an insurance policy against extinction. Its existence was compartmentalized so deeply that even planetary governments saw only fragments. Funding vanished into infrastructure projects, research grants, and asteroid mining initiatives that looked civilian on paper. In reality, humanity was building something meant to fight alone, cut off, and outnumbered. Every ship in the fleet was designed around endurance rather than intimidation. Hulls layered with adaptive alloys repaired themselves under fire. Power cores ran redundant cycles capable of sustaining combat operations for months without resupply. Where alien vessels relied on centralized command, Terran ships were autonomous by necessity. If command was lost, the mission continued. The crews were different as well. Vanguard personnel were not recruited, they were selected. Psychological screening favored restraint over aggression, patience over pride. Officers trained simultaneously in tactics, engineering, and diplomacy, because humans had learned that wars were often decided before the first shot was fired. A vanguard captain was expected to fight, negotiate, and rebuild if required. Artificial intelligence served not as a master, but as a partner. Human AIs were restricted by layers of ethical architecture that alien analysts would later find disturbing. They could optimize battle outcomes, but never override human judgment. The Concorde would mistake this for inefficiency. They were wrong. It made the fleet unpredictable. Resource limitations, another alien assumption, were a myth. While the Concorde fought over inhabited worlds, humanity turned outward. The Kuiper Belt became an industrial ring. The Oort cloud, once theoretical, transformed into a network of extraction platforms feeding shipyards hidden in gravitational shadows. Humans did not conquer planets to gain strength. They harvested emptiness. When the Vanguard fleet powered up, it did so without fanfare. No declarations were issued. No threats followed. Ships slipped from their berths and aligned with mechanical precision, each movement calculated to minimize detectable signatures. To alien sensors, it appeared as if space itself had begun rearranging. Intelligence agencies across the Concorde finally noticed the anomaly. Reports flooded command centers, conflicting and incomplete. Fleet tonnage estimates doubled, then tripled. Ship classifications failed entirely. These were not vessels built to match known threats. They were built to end them. By the time Concorde analysts understood what humanity had created, the Vanguard fleet was already moving. Not toward revenge, not toward conquest, but toward resolution. The galaxy had mistaken human silence for fear. It was about to learn the difference between hesitation and control. To humanity, this preparation was not born of paranoia but memory. They remembered extinction-level scares, near misses, and allies who vanished because they trusted treaties alone. Every system in the Vanguard fleet reflected that history. Logistics chains were decentralized. Command authority was distributed. Even morale was engineered, reinforced by absolute clarity of purpose. Survive. Protect. End conflicts fast. As the fleet accelerated, no crew questioned why they had trained for this day. The question had never been if it would come, only when. In that certainty lay the true danger the Concorde had failed to measure. Humans did not improvise their survival. They rehearsed it across generations. The Vanguard fleet was not a reaction to loss, but a conclusion drawn long ago. And as it crossed the boundary into contested space, history shifted quietly, because preparation, once unleashed, cannot be argued with. No signal followed, no warning remained, and no doubt survived among those watching the approach of a force built to finish what words could not undo centuries of complacency forever and fear. The Concorde assembled its response with confidence bordering on ritual. 3 battle groups locked formation along the frontier, ships layered in defensive screens, banners broadcast across open channels. Admirals delivered speeches about deterrence and unity. Their words meant as much for their own crews as for the watching galaxy. They expected bluster, negotiations, maybe a token skirmish. What arrived instead was silence. Terran vessels translated into real space without fanfare. No challenge codes. No targeting pings. They formed a precise geometric spread that ignored traditional attack vectors entirely. Concorde sensors struggled to track individual ships as human hulls shifted emissions constantly, refusing to settle into predictable signatures. The alien commanders mistook this for confusion. They ordered weapons hot. Ultimatums followed, long and ceremonial, demanding surrender and compliance. The humans replied with a single transmission, identical on every frequency. Stand down. This is your last warning. There was no threat embedded, no emotional inflection. To the Concorde, it sounded hollow. They opened fire. The first exchange ended before most Concorde gunners realized combat had begun. Human drones emerged from nowhere, not attacking ships directly but slicing through sensor arrays, communication spines, and power relays with surgical efficiency. Targeting systems failed simultaneously across the line. Missiles drifted uselessly, awaiting commands that never came. Terran ships advanced through the chaos, weapons firing only when solutions were absolute. Shots did not scatter or overwhelm. They struck engines, reactors, and command decks with restraint that confused alien observers. Ships were disabled, not destroyed. Crews found themselves alive, adrift, and suddenly irrelevant. 8 minutes into the engagement, the Concorde's central flagship attempted to rally what remained of the formation. Its transmission cut mid-sentence as its propulsion vanished. Human boarding pods latched briefly, extracted data cores, then disengaged without taking prisoners. Control, not conquest, defined every move. Across Concorde command channels, panic replaced doctrine. No contingency plans addressed an enemy that refused emotional escalation. Human tactics showed no hunger for glory, no reckless charges. They moved like a system executing a solution already solved. Each action anticipated the next alien response before it was chosen. One Concorde captain, watching his weapons go dark while his ship remained intact, understood the truth too late. Humanity was not fighting to prove superiority. They were enforcing boundaries. The distinction mattered. Fear spread faster than debris as crews realized surrender was irrelevant. The humans were deciding outcomes unilaterally. When the last Concorde ship lost mobility, the battlefield fell silent. No pursuit followed. No final blow. Terran vessels held position, weapons cold, as if waiting for acknowledgement rather than submission. The message transmitted then was not triumphant. Hostilities terminated. Withdraw all forces. Further aggression will be prevented. For the first time in its history, the Concorde had been defeated without spectacle. The galaxy watched recordings replayed from 1,000 angles, analysts struggling to explain how an emerging species dismantled a veteran armada with such economy. The answer unsettled them. Humanity had not fought like conquerors or berserkers. They had fought like custodians correcting an error. As damaged Concorde ships drifted helplessly, their crews alive but humbled, a realization settled across alien space. This was not the full strength of the Terran military. This was a demonstration, measured and deliberately limited. If this was restraint, then escalation was unthinkable. The moment lingered in silence, heavier than any explosion. Somewhere between disbelief and dread, the Concorde finally understood that humanity's reputation for violence was incomplete. The real danger was not how fiercely humans fought, but how calmly they chose when to stop. The Vanguard fleet did not pause to celebrate the victory. They advanced with the same measured precision that had shattered the blockade, moving deeper into Concorde territory without firing on a single civilian vessel. Their trajectory made no tactical sense to alien strategists conditioned to expect conquest. Instead of seizing populated worlds, humanity targeted supply corridors, military relays, and propaganda hubs, systematically dismantling the infrastructure that enabled the Concorde to rule through fear. Civilian sectors braced for devastation that never came. Terran ships slipped past stations without locking weapons, issuing only advisory broadcasts instructing populations to remain clear of military installations. Some aliens expected traps. Others suspected a ruse to lower defenses. But nothing happened. Human vessels moved with the indifference of surgeons bypassing healthy tissue. Panic began dissolving into confusion. On key military worlds, the Concorde prepared for desperate defense, Planetary cannons powered up, orbital shields flickered to full strength, and evacuation protocols activated. They anticipated bombardments, the kind the Concorde itself had used on lesser species. Instead, Terran cyberwar teams struck invisibly. One by one, shield grids collapsed without explosions. Weapon platforms shut down as AI systems were overwritten. Military governors found themselves locked out of their own command centers, their authority evaporating in silence. Across the galaxy, alien citizens watched their news networks glitch, then stabilize with new information. Entire archives of the Concorde's internal communications appeared in encrypted public channels, uploaded by Terran operatives and decoded minutes later by curious civilians. Generations of manipulated history unspooled in real time, fabricated threats, hidden treaties, suppressed evidence of peaceful human outreach. The image of humanity as violent aggressors shattered under undeniable truth. Public opinion shifted violently. Protests erupted on core worlds demanding answers. Subjugated species, long intimidated by Concorde power, realized the Empire's stability depended on lies. Even military personnel hesitated as orders from the High Council came layered with desperation. Some fleets defected. Others powered down and awaited direction from the advancing humans, unsure whether resistance meant annihilation or merely embarrassment. Through it all, the Vanguard fleet stayed consistent. They neutralized threats, bypassed innocence, and communicated only what was necessary. In doing so, they accomplished something no alien empire had ever achieved. They broke their enemy without demanding blood. Each move demonstrated discipline that frightened even those who admired it. To fight with such precision required a level of control the Concorde had never imagined. When humanity reached the inner territories, resistance evaporated. Core defense networks, once symbols of absolute dominance, lay in disarray. Admirals who had mocked Earth now argued over escape routes. The High Council called emergency sessions, issuing contradictory directives as their grip on the galaxy slipped. They had prepared for a violent invader. They had no strategy against an opponent who refused to play the part. Terran ships reached the capital sector without firing a single shot at a population center. The silent advance from fringe to heartland became a legend in real time, spreading through intercepted transmissions and word of mouth. Civilians began treating the Vanguard fleet not as a doomsday force but as a cleansing storm exposing the rot of an empire. By the time the humans established orbital presence above the capital, the Concorde's unity had collapsed completely. Systems declared neutrality. Fleets ignored central command. Officials spoke of negotiating from strength even as their defenses crumbled beneath them. What unsettled them most was not defeat, it was the realization that humanity had chosen this path deliberately. They could have burned worlds. They could have crippled economies. Instead, they dismantled only what enabled oppression. It was a lesson written without rhetoric, delivered without cruelty, and understood by any species capable of reason. The Concorde expected fury. They received discipline. They expected retaliation. They received structure. And as Terran banners flickered into orbit, one truth became undeniable: humanity was not marching to conquer the galaxy. They were marching to reset it. The arrival of the Vanguard fleet above the galactic capital ended centuries of certainty in a single, silent moment. The Concorde had always believed the core untouchable, protected by treaties, traditions, and the assumption that no power would dare cross every boundary at once. Humanity crossed them all without hesitation and then stopped, holding position with an authority that required no announcement. The High Council convened an emergency session, their chamber flooded with overlapping voices and fragmented data feeds. Defensive systems reported ready status, even as every officer present knew the truth. Their fleets were gone, their networks compromised, their credibility shattered. Still, pride lingered. They assumed humanity would demand territory, tribute, or symbolic submission. That was how the galaxy worked. Power took. Humanity did not take. They spoke. The Terran envoy's transmission cut through the chaos with calm precision. There was no grandstanding, no threats veiled as diplomacy. The message was simple, deliberate, and devastating in its restraint. The Concord military authority would be dissolved. Its propaganda apparatus dismantled. Interstellar policy would be rebuilt on verifiable evidence, open archives, and mutual accountability. No worlds would change hands. No species would be punished for obedience under coercion. The chamber fell silent. This was not a conqueror's ultimatum. It was a correction. The council members struggled to reconcile overwhelming defeat with the absence of humiliation. Some protested, accusing humanity of deception, of planning occupation once compliance was achieved. The response came instantly. Terran ships powered down offensive systems across the sector, broadcasting telemetry openly. They were leaving once the terms were enacted. Confusion turned to fear. A power that conquered without claiming spoils was unpredictable. More dangerous than ambition was restraint paired with capability. The Concord realized then that humanity's true leverage had never been their fleet. It was their willingness to walk away after winning. As negotiations concluded, observers across the galaxy recorded the moment as a turning point not defined by explosions or fallen capitals, but by realization. Humanity had proven something no empire had before. That overwhelming force could be used without cruelty. That dominance did not require domination. That the most terrifying power was one that could destroy everything and chose not to. When the Vanguard fleet withdrew from orbit, there was no celebration. No monuments were erected. Human ships vanished into slip space the same way they had arrived, efficiently, quietly, without spectacle. In their wake remained a fractured Concord forced to rebuild itself without the illusion of superiority. Alien historians would later write that this was the moment the galaxy learned a new form of fear. Not the fear of annihilation, but the fear of accountability. Humanity had not erased the Concord. They had exposed it, stripped it of narrative control, and left it to face the consequences of its own actions. Across former Concord space, a single phrase circulated in whispers, in archived transmissions, and in private council chambers. It carried no malice, only regret. They had mistaken patience for weakness. They had mistaken diplomacy for fear. And in doing so, they had provoked a force that did not seek war, but would end it on its own terms. Long after the Vanguard fleet had returned to the darkness between stars, that understanding endured. The galaxy did not fear humanity because of what they destroyed. It feared them because of what they chose to spare, and because it now knew, with absolute certainty, that if humanity ever spoke the words again, they would not be ignored. They had provoked the wrong fleet.